Hello again, and welcome back everybody for another video. In this video, I want to talk about an idea that's important to any college writing class, and that is the writing process. I mentioned this a little bit in my introduction video where I talked about, process writing and that being part of our grade, drafts and stuff. So I just kind of wanted to dig into this and go through what I think are some of the steps in the writing process and kind of talk about how we're going to go about writing our essays for this class. So if you guys had to write essays in high school, I'm sure that a lot of them were timed essays, especially the ones for standardized tests and stuff, where they give you like 40 minutes or like an hour to write a whole essay. And the writing process is the exact opposite of this. The view from people in composition, which is, this class is not composition, but we're going to be thinking about, moving on to the next class that is, English 101, which is composition. Um, so one of the main things with composition is that writing is not the kind of thing that you can just sit down and do it in 40 minutes and then it's done. You know, it much more looks at writing as something that develops, something where there's different stages where we kind of go back and forth, where we want to get our ideas down there, and then we might want to change things, we might want to add things. So I do think this is important because for me, these writing classes that you guys are taking kind of at the beginning of your college career, the main goal for me is that when you guys get to higher level courses, that you kind of have a plan of, like, when you get an assignment when you're like a junior and you get an assignment in one of your classes, and it's like, okay, write an essay about this, has to be 8 pages, due next month. In that class, the teacher's not going to take the time to be like, okay, and here's how you want to write the essay, and here's what you need to do, and here's the steps to go through to get it done. They're not going to do any of that. So the thing for us here is to kind of have a plan in place where when we get an assignment like that in a higher level course, we know what to do. We say, okay, I'm going to start by doing this, and then I'll do a draft, and then um, so yeah, I see this as very important for us all to kind of figure out. That's the other thing about the writing process, is that I think everybody's writing process can be a little bit different. For some people, certain parts of it might work better. Some people might need to write drafts and then get feedback on them. Other people might be able to get a draft and then just fix it up themselves. Who knows? But the important thing is that you find some of these steps that work for you. So I'm just going to list some of them here, and I'll say a little bit about each of these steps. I'm going to do more in-depth videos about a lot of these things, so I'm just going to kind of go through them here. So the first one with when we have to write an essay, the first thing is brainstorming. You get an assignment, you get a topic, it's asking you to write an essay about a certain thing. The first thing you just got to do is be like, okay, well, what are my thoughts on this? What's my argument going to be? Which side do I want to take? Or like, what are some of the things I could reference in this? So for us in this class, a lot of the readings that we're going to do, like your first homework reading, for instance, are going to be meant to prepare us for the essays that we're going to write. So I'm hoping that the readings that we do and the discussions that we have in discussion boards and discussion, what I have to say on my videos, that hopefully that'll help us to kind of start generating ideas. But sometimes brainstorming can be a good place to do research, depending on what the topic is. Like sometimes you might want to read what other people have said about the topic to kind of figure out what you think and see what you agree with and what you don't. Sometimes that can be a bad idea though, because then you read what other people are saying about it, and then that's kind of like the only way you can see it, or you might have trouble coming up with your own ideas about it. So yeah, you got to figure out how it works. But obviously, brainstorm. We just want to figure out what we think about the topic. Step number two, and again, these can be different for everybody, but I'm just giving my list. So step number two that I have is coming up with a thesis. I'm going to do a whole video about coming up with a thesis very soon. But the thesis is the main idea. It's your argument if you're writing an argument essay. So you want to be clear on what the argument is that you're going to make, on what your main idea is going to be. I think that's something early on. You want to try to figure it out. Okay, here's what I'm going to try to be convincing people of in my paper. Because everything that you do in your essay is going to come back to the thesis. It's going to come back to the main idea. The next step I have is writing an outline. And if you guys have, maybe you've had to do outlines before, I'm sure that you had to do like the Roman numerals or like the big A and the little a. I think that way of doing it is unnecessary. I think the way that a lot of this stuff gets taught is kind of unnecessary. Um, yeah, so like I think that kind of outline probably always felt like busy work for us. We didn't really see it as helping us. But so like when I was in your position, when I was first starting college, I didn't do outlines. Sometimes I was required to do them in high school. I did them if it was required. I didn't like doing it. I didn't get anything out of it. But when I got to be like a junior or senior in college and I had to write like longer, more sophisticated papers, like, I'm in like a philosophy class and I have to write some 8-page paper about some complicated stuff. When you're in that kind of a situation, you kind of need to make an outline. And it can just be bullet points. That's how I would do it. When I would make an outline, I would write my thesis at the top, my argument, and then I would just make some bullet points of things I was going to talk about in each paragraph. I also I would use it to kind of plan where I was going to put in quotes. If I had quotes that I was going to use in my essay as like evidence for what I was saying, I would kind of plan with bullet points like where I was going to put those and what each paragraph would be about. And I think that I really do think that that helps a lot, especially when you're dealing with more longer papers and more difficult topics. It kind of can help you stay on track, especially if you're someone who feels like you get off topic or you start rambling or something. If you have an outline with the stuff written down, you can always look back at it and make sure that you're staying on topic. Um, oh, another thing I'll say with outlining, and I guess brainstorming. If you remember something that they might have had you do in school before, those like graphic organizers, like you might have had the one where it's like a circle and then there's like lines and there's like other smaller circles, or the one where it's like four boxes and it's supposed to be like first paragraph, second paragraph, third paragraph. Um, those things I think were super unhelpful. I think a lot of stuff about English, this kind of gets to what I'm going to do another video where, I gave you guys the discussion question about why we hate English classes. But I think those graphic organizers were something that it was a way, they were trying to teach us brainstorming and outlining and stuff, but I think those just did not work. I think it was taught very poorly. I don't think that stuff really helped us. So again, it's important to see that like even though the way we were taught a lot of this stuff before was bad and didn't help us, we've got to find kind of our own way to do it. So even if you've had bad experiences with outlining or brainstorming, I think it's important that you find a way to do it that works for you. Okay, so the next one I'm going to say is a draft. The next step. So once you have your thesis, you have your outline, now you start your draft. For us in this class, drafts are not going to need to be the whole length of the essay. Like if we're doing a 3-page essay, I usually want a draft to be like a page or a page and a half. Usually like half the length of the final version is good for a draft for me because again, maybe your experience with drafts was similar to mine, where the draft when I had to do them in high school and stuff, they like it felt like busy work. It felt like you were just writing the same essay twice, right? You would hand in your draft, you'd like get some feedback or whatever, and then you would try to change like four things, and then you would hand that in again as the final version. You would just be changing stuff like for the sake of changing it. You weren't really engaged in like making it a better essay or anything. So I think part of the problem there is that they made you write your drafts be the full paper. Whereas that's why for our drafts I'll say, if you have a page, page and a half, that's good. Because like I think by getting it started that way and then kind of stopping and looking at it and I'm always gonna read your drafts and you're gonna get feedback from me on your drafts. And then that can kind of be a good way to figure out how to finish off the essay and make the draft more of a stepping stone that's going to help you get to a better final product than this thing where we just feel like we're writing the same essay twice. So again, even though it's maybe been taught badly before, hopefully we can find a way of doing drafts that's going to help us. And yeah, the next step I had was feedback, which is just whenever you hand in a draft, you're going to get written feedback from me on Moodle. Usually I'll do a video kind of generalizing some of the things I saw in a lot of the rough drafts, but you'll get specific feedback from me posted on Moodle as like a comment. If you go to the place where you submit your draft, you'll be able to scroll over it. You should see like highlights and comments and stuff. So after we get feedback, the next step is going to be revising the essay. And the last one is proofreading. So the difference between revising and proofreading to me is that revising is more big picture stuff. It's the thesis, the paragraphs, the organization, the quotes. Does everything feel like it goes together? Do the paragraphs all connect to each other? That kind of stuff is for revision. And then proofreading is more like sentence level stuff. Really, to me, it's making sure there's no typos. We're going to talk about grammar in this class somewhat, but to me, grammar is just not one of the most important things about writing a good essay. I think it's very overrated, as you'll hear me talk about in some of my other videos. But proofreading, you really just want to make sure that what's on the page is what you want it to be there. Because having typos in your paper, like it doesn't seem like a big deal. It shouldn't maybe be a big deal, but I think there is a way where like as a professor, if you're reading all these essays and someone just like doesn't have capital letters or they forgot to put a period or whatever it is, kind of typo like that, it makes it seem like they didn't put in like a lot of effort, even if they might have, like it's kind of incorrect. And I try not to look at it that way, but I think a lot of professors do. So when you proofread, you just want to make sure there aren't any typos. I think that like printing out a physical copy of your paper can make it a lot easier to proofread. And I'll give you some other advice. But yeah, so there's some steps that we're going to go through when we write essays in this class. And again, just to give you guys this idea of the writing process, not something where you just sit down and knock it out, but instead something that takes, probably weeks, where you might have to go back and forth. Like maybe you have a thesis and you like it, but then you start your draft and then you realize you have to change your thesis and make it a little bit different, and then you do the draft again, and then you get some feedback, or you go to like the tutoring center or something. So yeah, writing process. There we have it. Okay, more videos coming soon.